All right, well, let me begin now to say, are you sensing some of the passions that God created you, some of the skill sets that God gave you? Because we're going to ask Rick Selk to come up. Rick, you're here, Executive Director for Youth for Christ. So listen hard. Listen to see if perhaps God is saying to you, youth are something that you should be paying attention to. I've created a passion in you for youth. Maybe your skill sets align with what Rick and Brad and the Youth for Christ team need. So, Rick, take us away for the next 18 minutes.
Good morning. The organization Youth for Christ is an exciting time because we are in probably the final stages, if we look at natural life, of one of our founders. And we're closing in on 70 years. And that 70-year history goes back to an area not very far from here. Western Springs, a western suburb here, and Wheaton. There were a couple of young pastors in the mid-1940s. One was named Torrey Johnson, and the other was named Billy Graham. And those two men launched a ministry called Youth for Christ in the high time, from what I understand, in America, coming off the tail end of World War II, and initially focusing on some military bases and some people that had military involvement. Quickly transitioned into a ministry focusing primarily on teenagers. When you fast forward into the 1960s and 70s, the ministry, which began, as many of us would know, the Billy Graham rally format, gather lots of people in auditoriums and stadiums and bring in singers and present the gospel, really transitioned to a ministry focusing on where teenagers are. Primarily in the late 60s and early 70s, transitioning to a ministry nameplate that we call Campus Life. It's one of our divisions today, focusing on junior and senior high school students, primarily, not exclusively, but primarily in public junior and senior high schools. We also have a ministry branch that we call City Life. Underneath that umbrella comes obviously urban ministries and ministries to incarcerated young people in juvenile detention facilities. Our scope today goes worldwide in about 120 countries. We're in some 200 different chapter entities around the United States, depending on the month as they go up and down. We, in the Chicago area, have been in existence since the 1940s. So we came in right on the beginning with the start here in the suburbs. We today like to say practically the mission of Youth for Christ is simply to share the life-changing message of Jesus Christ with every young person. We don't have parameters in any way, shape, or form as far as socioeconomic or religious background. Non-Christian kids are involved. Christian kids are involved. Very wealthy kids are involved. Very poor kids are involved. So the scope of our ministry today in the greater Chicago area takes us as far east as Valparaiso and LaPorte, Indiana. Takes us as far north as ministry sites in places like Barrington, Lake Zurich, Mundelein. We wrapped up there within the year, and we have a growing ministry in Arlington Heights. In the western suburbs, we have ministry sites in Wheaton and in Downers Grove. And then we have a lot of ministry going on out south of the city in the greater Kankakee area and as far south as Iroquois County in a town called Watseka. So that's the scope of our ministry in the Chicago area. We are working with about 35 part-time and full-time paid employees under our umbrella here. Annual operating budget at about $2.8 million annually. Governed by a board of trustees of 15 marketplace leaders and from a very diverse Christian but denominational array. We would like to say in a more formalized mission, YFC reaches young people everywhere, working together with the local church and other like-minded partners to raise up lifelong followers of Jesus who lead by their godliness in lifestyle, devotion to the Word of God and prayer, passion for sharing the love of Christ, and commitment to social involvement. We were listening to Crawford Loritz driving in. Some of you may have heard him on Moody Radio this morning, but he said something pretty fascinating, and I thought, boy, Dr. Loritz, I'd like to reuse that later this morning. He said, you know, when we enter ministry, whether it's marketplace, church ministry, parachurch ministry, we don't do it within the context of heaven. We do it within the context of demons and dysfunction. And you think about ministry to youth in America today, if I lined up our frontline staff people, they would tell you that the ministry that they're in, the context of demons and dysfunction is very, very real. I use this statistic. I've probably used it for 15 years. My history with Youth for Christ goes back some 25 years. And I've never been shot down on this. And the numbers that we get from the experts say that in America today, 7 out of 10 young people are not actively involved in any local church. So at any local junior high or high school in America, even in a place like Wheaton, Illinois, where there's probably above average options on churches and Christian education, we don't get pushback on those numbers. So today, briefly, a little bit about how I get here is I was born in Chicago downtown at the old Passavant Hospital, Northwestern, and I was put up for adoption. And I still to this day don't know anybody from my immediate biological family. I was adopted by a family that took me out about 30 plus miles south of the city. That's where I was raised. Working class parents, a factory worker dad, and a worker's mom. And evangelical Christianity was not a part of my upbringing, probably from the ages of 15 to late 19 to 20. A lot of weekend activities were very immoral and unethical. I met a man in my late teens who shared Jesus with me in a way like no one ever did. We did attend a very liberal, sort of social church regularly, but I never really embraced the gospel, and I had a true born-again experience in early 1984, and it really was driven by a couple of things. I started to read the Bible. This pastor that I met challenged me to read the Bible verse by verse, chapter by chapter, and I've never lost the affinity for the power of the Scriptures. That and a simple, crazy deal in watching television one night, there was an infomercial for a book called Power for Living that was produced by the DeMoss Foundation. And I read that book, and between reading the Bible verse by verse and reading that book, God changed my life drastically with His Spirit. My career started with the Commonwealth Edison Corporation in the south suburbs. I thought that was going to be my life. It was a pretty lucrative early career. I started there when I was 19. I was taking college classes on the side, company classes, and I thought this was where I would end. Not long after I was there, though, I had this Christian conversion. And with that, I learned of this ministry called Youth for Christ. I'd never heard of anything like this when I was in high school. We had no parachurch ministry options at the school I attended. It was very foreign to me. But in 1986, I began as a volunteer. That same year, I purchased a share of an ownership in a health club. So I thought, I've got this nice little volunteer thing here, a business that I'm a part of owning here, and a career that was stable with a company like Commonwealth Edison. I worked as a volunteer, reaching to young people in a couple of public school campus life outreaches from 86 through 89. And in 89, there was a chief executive at Youth for Christ, and he told us that he wanted us to consider making some drastic commitments, and one of those commitments he asked me to make was leaving a full-time career job to go full-time with Youth for Christ. So that was 89, and here we are today. I thank the Lord for changes in that story in my life, because the story that I want to share about just one example of mission impact in our organization is a guy named Dan Chapman. If you've been in business at all in the south suburbs, you may recall the name Chapman was tied to Chapman Kickert Real Estate for many years through the 70s and 80s. That family is the founding family of a ministry now known worldwide as Bible League. It started with the World Home Bible League. Dan Chapman is the grandson of the founder of the Bible League, William Chapman. Dan was a campus life kid in the late 80s with us. And Dan came from a Christian family, obviously. But Dan's wife-to-be came from a non-Christian family, campus life kid, who we led to Christ. Now, his wife's family, over a 20-year period, all have come to Christ. Dan Chapman has led our corporate board of trustees, and today, some 20 plus years later, still serves in a leadership position on our board. He's a very successful businessman, owns health food stores called Sunrise in the south suburbs, and he also has his own full line of vitamin D supplements that are in places like Whole Foods, etc. I want to get to today our mission strategy that we're rolling out. We've been rolling this out in the Chicago area for about the last 16 months or so, and we call it Empower. Empowering a new generation of young people, and especially a new generation of leaders. There we go. We had a little problem with this earlier. So in our target ministry area, well over 1 million young people under the umbrella that God has assigned to us between the ages of 11 and 18. Youth today, more than ever, starving for relationships. Remember this context of dysfunction and demons. We're living in it. Who will train and lead in reaching them for Christ? Dan Waldmuth has ties to this area. His dad, Sam, was also the international president of Youth for Christ and a very successful businessman here in the south or in the northwest suburbs. Gave us this quote: "We need an army of relational soldiers to impact this generation with the life-changing message of Jesus." We believe that if we could train while we proclaim our gospel message, and what that looks like today is under our umbrella some 32 ministry sites where young people are meeting every week throughout the greater area here, and also that means about 6,000 different teenagers in a given year are in touch with our staff and volunteers. So while we're proclaiming to those numbers, and on a given week it's about 1,600 young people, what we've determined is a strategy that takes us to a partnership with Christian colleges and universities that we've identified around the area. And the way we pick these colleges and universities is where we have functioning ministry sites within walking distance of these campuses, or a very short drive. So the 7 highlighted there you can see: to the east, Valparaiso University; to the south, Olivet Nazarene University; in DuPage County, Wheaton College; in the southwest suburbs, Palos Trinity; downtown Chicago, Moody; Judson College in Elgin, or now Judson University; and Trinity International University in Deerfield. This strategy is not something that we think possibly could work. What you see highlighted here, where we could have ministry sites in proximity to these campuses, where we could use our current outreach strategies, which include campus life programs in middle schools and high schools, city life ministries in the urban setting, and then institutional ministries like we have functioning right now at the Juvenile Detention Center at 26th in California, Cook County Jail. It's a marvelous outreach. We believe that what we've done at Olivet Nazarene University for some 30 years, since the early 80s, we can replicate. And that's where we're going right now. When I started in the mid-80s in YFC in the Kankakee area, we were working with some 75 volunteers from Olivet every single semester, and we're still doing that today. We, within the last few months, opened our first new prototype in the Chicago area that is about 2 blocks north of the Moody Bible Institute campus. It is on Wells Street on the back side of the campus. And what we believe is this: if we recruit the same kinds of numbers that we've been getting from Olivet, we believe that we could multiply our ministry like we've never multiplied it before. These pictures show the way these numbers roll out. When I've seen ministry presentations and statistics, I'd say, wow, looks like some pie-in-the-sky numbers. I can tell you that in a given year, we work with about 75 students from Olivet currently, but we have way more than 100 sign up every year. Through screening and vetting, it's very, very feasible to get to these types of outcomes. We're asking people here to consider how you might be able to partner with us in this mission. We're asking people here to consider a couple of specific ways to get involved. If you have passion for sharing the gospel, direct ministry volunteers are always needed. But a couple of very tangible ways for people with sharp business minds to get involved would be, first, to assist in building networks of community support around area ministries. In every community where we have a campus life or city life outreach,
we have adult volunteer committees that serve in that capacity. We need people that could help provide review of our business and administrative practices with an eye toward efficiencies. This idea of bringing the whole work in the metropolitan area together has only been undertaken across the last couple of years, and we're still working on those efficiencies. And then we're really looking at some expertise in the area of increasing our visibility in the Chicago market through marketing and communications. And very specifically, I'll end with this story. Our national president said he had a meeting with some partners and donors in the Chicago area not that long ago. And one businessman from the Lake Zurich area was very standoffish. In fact, this was the scenario. We had a relationship with a dad who might have had an estate that might have been entrusted to kids, and there was almost a little bit of a push that the adult son was thinking that possibly these meetings could be dipping into his inheritance. So the son was giving a pushback, and the son was saying, you know, we really, if we're going to invest in this sort of thing, we really want to invest in ministries with impact, and we're really not sure about the impact of Youth for Christ. Our president rode gracefully with them through the conversation, and as they got on in the conversation, the man that was giving him pushback said, you know, let me tell you about one ministry that we would get behind and that my son's been involved in, and at Lake Zurich High School, he's been involved in this thing called Campus Life, and we get behind that. Okay, so as parachurch ministries go, because we have a couple of nameplate brands out there, some people don't always associate when they see a City Life bus going by that it's a Youth for Christ ministry, or a Campus Life banner at a high school that it's a Youth for Christ ministry. So we're struggling with some of those marketing branding issues. And with that story, I guess I'll end in saying that the Ministry of Youth for Christ is alive and well some 70 years after its launch in the Chicago area. Again, taking the gospel to young people in some contexts of demon and dysfunction. And the big question for us today that we're considering is this: how can we identify strategic initiatives to gain a better market visibility and awareness in and around this huge metropolitan area? Thank you.